Jake Morrison felt his stomach drop as the transport shuttle broke through the docking bay, doors of Station Gamma 7. He pressed his face against the small window and saw the massive structure, stretching out in every direction. The station was bigger than any city he had seen back on Earth. Metal corridors twisted like veins through the structure, and bright lights flickered from thousands of windows. This place was home to the best soldiers from across the galaxy, and now it would be his home too. The shuttle landed with a soft thud. Jake grabbed his bag and followed the other recruits down the ramp. His hands were sweating. He had dreamed about this moment for 2 years, ever since Earth joined the Galactic Defense Initiative. But now that he was here, surrounded by aliens that towered over him and spoke in languages that sounded like grinding metal or singing birds, he felt very small. There were 12 humans in this group, selected from thousands of applicants across all the Earth colonies. Jake recognized a few faces from the preliminary training on Luna Station. There was Kate Sullivan, a tough woman from the Mars settlements who never smiled but always got the job done. Next to her stood Danny Cooper, a quiet guy from Earth's Asian territories who could memorize entire textbooks in a single night. The others were strangers, but they all shared the same nervous energy. The docking bay was filled with recruits from other species. Jake saw beings he had only read about in study materials. The Vraks were massive creatures with bodies covered in thick armor plating that looked like black stone. They moved slowly but deliberately, and their 6 legs made sounds like hammers hitting the metal floor. The Kelthari were more slender, with 4 arms that moved independently of each other, and large eyes that seemed to see in multiple directions at once. There were also Zephons, creatures made of what looked like living crystal that caught the light and split it into rainbow patterns across the walls. A loud voice boomed across the docking bay, and everyone fell silent. Jake turned to see a reptilian creature standing on an elevated platform. The being was covered in emerald green scales that shimmered under the harsh lights. Its eyes were bright yellow with vertical slits for pupils, and when it opened its mouth to speak, Jake could see rows of sharp teeth and a forked tongue that flickered in and out. "I am Commander Vrel," the creature announced. "You are here because your species believe you have what it takes to become beast handlers. You will learn to bond with the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. You will train them, fight alongside them, and trust your life to them. Most of you will fail. Some of you will die, but those who succeed will become part of an elite force that protects civilized space from threats you cannot yet imagine." The commander's eyes swept across the assembled recruits. When his gaze passed over the small group of humans, Jake thought he saw something like doubt in those alien features. "Let me introduce your head trainer," Commander Vrel continued, "Draxon of the Krell warrior clans. He will be responsible for turning you soft recruits into proper handlers. If you survive his training, you might actually be worth something." A door at the far end of the bay opened, and the largest being Jake had ever seen walked through. Draxon was at least 9 feet tall, with muscles that bulged under dark red skin. He had 4 arms, each as thick as Jake's entire torso, and his face looked like someone had carved it from rock and then beaten it with hammers for good measure. 2 small horns jutted from his forehead, and his eyes were completely black, like pools of oil. Draxon walked to the platform with heavy steps that shook the floor. He crossed all 4 arms and stared down at the recruits with an expression that clearly said he was not impressed. "Pathetic," Draxon growled. His voice was so deep that Jake felt it in his chest. "Every cycle they send me weaker and weaker specimens. I see Vraks who look soft from city living, Kelthari who have probably never fought anything more dangerous than their own shadows, Zephons who will shatter the first time a real predator hits them." His black eyes found the group of humans, and he smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "And humans," Draxon said the word like it tasted bad. "The newest species to stumble into the galaxy, barely out of your own solar system, and already you think you can play with the big predators. Look at you. No armor plating, no extra limbs for control, no natural weapons. You are weak, slow, and soft. Your species should stick to filing reports and managing supply chains." Jake felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept his face calm. Several of the other humans shifted uncomfortably. Kate's jaw was clenched tight, and Danny had gone very pale. Draxon stepped down from the platform and walked directly toward Jake. The alien trainer stopped right in front of him, so close that Jake had to tilt his head back to maintain eye contact. Draxon leaned down, and Jake could smell something like sulfur on his breath. "You," Draxon said. "What is your name, human?" Jake Morrison, sir, Jake replied, keeping his voice steady. And why are you here, Jake Morrison? Did you get lost on your way to the human quarters? This is a training facility for real warriors, not a daycare for primitives. Some of the alien recruits laughed. Jake heard the clicking sounds that meant the Vraks were amused, and the musical trills that signaled Kilthari laughter. I am here to learn how to bond with and train war beasts. Sir, Jake said. Draxon straightened up and laughed. It was a harsh, mocking sound that echoed through the docking bay. You will learn nothing except how much pain you can endure before you quit, Draxon said. Humans have no business in this program. You lack everything necessary to dominate a predator, but since your pitiful species somehow convinced the initiative to give you a chance, I will enjoy proving how wrong they were. The alien trainer turned to address all the recruits again. Training begins at dawn cycle tomorrow. You will be assigned quarters in barracks level 7. Study your orientation materials. Get whatever rest you can. Tomorrow you will learn what real work feels like. Dismissed. The recruits began to file out of the docking bay, following guide lights that led toward the barracks. Jake walked with the other humans, none of them speaking. The excitement he had felt on the shuttle was gone, replaced by a cold determination. Draxon had made his opinion very clear. The alien thought humans were weak and worthless. Jake had spent his whole life proving people wrong when they underestimated him. Growing up in the rough districts of New Seattle, he had learned that being smaller or weaker did not mean being helpless. It meant being smarter, working harder, and never giving up. As he followed the guide lights through the massive station, passing aliens who stared at him like he was some kind of curious animal, Jake made a silent promise to himself. He would not quit, he would not fail, and he would make Draxon regret every mocking word. The station's artificial lights dimmed to simulate night as they reached the barracks. Jake found his assigned quarters, a small room with a bed, a desk, and a computer terminal. He sat down and activated the terminal, pulling up everything the database had on war beasts and training techniques. He had a lot to learn, and not much time to learn it. But that had never stopped him before. The alarm screamed through the barracks at what felt like the middle of the night. Jake rolled out of bed, his body still aching from the long shuttle journey. The digital display on his wall showed that dawn cycle was starting, though in space there was no real dawn. The station just dimmed and brightened its lights to give everyone a sense of day and night. He dressed quickly in the training uniform that had been left in his quarters. The material was strange, some kind of fabric that adjusted to his body temperature and seemed to repair small tears automatically. When he stepped into the hallway, he found the other human recruits stumbling out of their rooms, looking just as tired as he felt. Anyone actually sleep? Kate asked, rubbing her eyes. Not really, Danny admitted. Kept thinking about what that trainer said. Draxon is just trying to scare us, Jake said, though he was not entirely sure he believed that. It is probably part of the training. Break down our confidence so they can build us back up. Or maybe he really does think we are useless. Another human named Lisa Martinez said quietly. She was young, barely 20, and looked like she might cry. They followed the guide lights to a massive cafeteria where hundreds of recruits from dozens of species were gathering. The food stations offered different options for different biologies. Jake grabbed something that looked like oatmeal and tasted like mushrooms, along with a protein bar and a cup of dark liquid that the dispenser labeled as human-compatible stimulant. It tasted like coffee's angry cousin. The human recruits sat together at one table, surrounded by aliens who gave them curious or dismissive looks. Jake noticed that the recruits seemed to naturally group by species. The Vraks sat with other Vraks. The Kilthari formed their own cluster. Nobody was mixing, everyone staying with their own kind. Draxon entered the cafeteria, and the noise level dropped immediately. The massive Krell walked between the tables, all forearms crossed behind his back, studying the recruits like a farmer checking livestock. Finish eating and report to Training Arena 3, he announced. You have 10 minutes, everyone ate faster. Jake forced down the mushroom oatmeal and drained his coffee substitute. His stomach was doing flips, but he knew he needed the energy. Training Arena 3 turned out to be a massive indoor space that could hold several football fields. The ceiling was so high up that Jake could barely see it through the artificial mist that hung in the air. The floor was divided into different sections, each one simulating a different type of terrain. There was sand, rock, ice, what looked like thick mud, and even a section filled with water. Draxon stood in the center of the arena, waiting. When all the recruits had assembled, he began speaking in that deep, rumbling voice that seemed to make the air vibrate. Beast handling requires physical strength, mental discipline, and the ability to endure pain, Draxon said. Today we find out which of you possess even the minimum requirements. We will start with basic conditioning. Follow me. He led them to the rocky terrain section and stopped in front of a pile of large stones. Each stone had handles carved into it, and a number marked on the side. Each species has different physical capabilities, Draxon explained. You will carry a stone appropriate to your species' average strength. Vrax will take level 7 stones, Kelthari level 5, Zephons level 3, and humans— he smiled that unpleasant smile again. Humans will take level 4 stones. Let us be generous and assume you are stronger than living crystals. Jake looked at the level 4 stone. It was roughly the size of a large watermelon and probably weighed close to 80 pounds. That was heavy but manageable for someone in good shape. Then he saw Draxon pick up a massive boulder marked level 10 and hoist it onto his shoulders like it weighed nothing. You will carry your stones around the arena perimeter, Draxon announced. 5 complete circuits. If you drop your stone, you start over from the beginning. Begin. The recruits scrambled to grab their assigned stones. Jake wrapped his hands around the handles of a level 4 stone and lifted. The weight pulled at his shoulders and back, but he got it up to chest height and started walking. The first circuit was not too bad. Jake's muscles burned, but he had trained for this. He had spent months in Earth's gravity preparing his body, knowing the station would have standard galactic gravity that was slightly higher than Earth normal. The second circuit was harder. His shoulders were screaming. Sweat poured down his face. He saw one of the Zephon recruits stumble and drop their stone with a crystalline cry of frustration. The being had to go back to the start. Halfway through the third circuit, Jake's arms were shaking. He looked around and saw that most recruits were struggling. Even the mighty Vrax were breathing hard through their armored faceplates. But Draxon walked beside them, still carrying his massive boulder, not even breathing hard. Is this the best you can do? Draxon called out. My hatchlings carry heavier stones for fun. You call yourselves warriors? You are barely qualified to be pack animals. Jake gritted his teeth and kept walking, one foot in front of the other. Do not think about the weight. Do not think about the pain. Just keep moving. He noticed that Draxon seemed to be spending extra time near the human recruits, offering special commentary just for them. Look at the humans, Draxon announced loudly, already turning red in the face. Their weak cardiovascular systems cannot handle basic exercise. Notice how their thin muscles quiver under a load that a Krell child would consider light. Kate was ahead of Jake, her face set in a mask of determination. Danny was falling behind, his legs wobbling. Lisa had tears streaming down her face, but she was still moving. Jake finished the third circuit and started the fourth. His vision was getting blurry from sweat. His hands were cramping around the stone's handles. Every muscle in his body was begging him to stop. The human called Jake Morrison, Draxon said suddenly right beside him. You are slowing down. Perhaps you should quit now and save yourself further embarrassment. I am sure there are easier jobs on this station. Cleaning waste recycling systems, perhaps. That seems more suited to human capabilities. Jake did not respond. He did not have the breath to waste on words. He just kept walking. No response? Draxon continued, walking beside him easily despite the massive boulder on his shoulders. That is wise. You should save your limited energy for walking, though at this pace you will still be on your fourth circuit when the others finish their fifth. The alien was right. Jake was falling behind. Most of the other recruits were already on their fifth and final circuit. But he was not the slowest. 2 Zephons and 1 Kelthari were still on their third, having had to restart after dropping their stones. Jake pushed through the fourth circuit and started his fifth. His body was beyond pain now, operating on pure stubbornness. He could hear Draxon mocking other recruits, spreading his cruel commentary around the arena. But the words stopped registering. There was only the stone, the path, and the need to finish. When he finally completed the fifth circuit and set down his stone, his legs nearly gave out. He stood there, hands on his knees, gasping for air. Around him, other recruits were in similar states of exhaustion. Draxon set down his boulder with a casual thud that shook the ground. Pathetic, he declared. That was a warm-up exercise. Now we begin the actual training. A collective groan went through the recruits. Jake looked up in disbelief. That was just the warm-up? Follow me, Draxon ordered, walking toward another section of the arena. Jake forced his legs to move. Beside him, Kate was limping. Danny looked like he might throw up. But they all followed. Nobody quit. Not yet. The next 4 hours were a blur of suffering. Draxon led them through obstacle courses designed for beings with 4 arms, making the humans struggle to compensate. He had them do strength exercises that pushed every species to their limits. He made them run through the mud section while carrying weights. He timed them on climbing walls that seemed designed for creatures with claws. And through it all, he kept up his constant stream of criticism and mockery, with special attention reserved for the human recruits. Humans are supposed to be good at endurance, Draxon said during a running exercise. I have read that your species used to hunt prey by chasing it until it collapsed from exhaustion. But looking at you now, I think those reports must have been exaggerated. Perhaps you only hunted very slow, very stupid prey. When training finally ended, Jake could barely walk back to the barracks. Every part of his body hurt. He fell onto his bed fully clothed and closed his eyes. The 2 weeks passed in a blur of physical training and late-night study sessions. Jake pushed his body through Draxon's increasingly difficult exercises, while filling his mind with every piece of information about shadow maws he could find. He practiced the vocal patterns until his throat was sore, making the clicks and low rumbles over and over in his quarters while watching videos of wild pack interactions. Other recruits had started to notice his obsession. Some thought he was wasting his time. A few seemed genuinely concerned for his safety. But most just watched with curiosity, wondering if the human would actually go through with facing a shadow maw. On the 10th day, Draxon took the recruits to the beast enclosures for the first time. The facility was enormous, a series of biodomes that simulated different planetary environments. Each dome housed creatures from compatible ecosystems, separated by energy barriers and reinforced walls. The group walked through observation corridors that let them see into the enclosures without being exposed to danger. Jake pressed close to the transparent barriers, studying everything he could see. In one dome, a pack of 6-legged creatures with crystalline horns practiced hunting techniques on mechanical prey. In another, flying predators the size of small aircraft circled beneath an artificial sky. There were water-dwelling beasts that looked like nightmares with tentacles, and burrowing creatures that moved through artificial rock formations like they were swimming through water, and then they reached the Shadow Maw enclosure. The dome was designed to look like a rocky wasteland under a dim red sun. Large boulders provided hiding spots in elevated positions. The ground was covered in dark sand that shifted in patterns created by hidden air currents. And in the center of it all, resting on a flat rock, was the biggest predator Jake had ever seen. The Shadow Maw was even more impressive than the holographic displays had suggested. Its black fur seemed to absorb light, making it look like a hole cut into reality. The 6 eyes tracked movement with terrifying precision. When it yawned, Jake could see all 3 rows of teeth, each one as long as his finger. The creature was easily 8 feet tall at the shoulder, and probably weighed close to 1,000 pounds of pure muscle and killing instinct. That is Beast Unit 47, Draxon announced. It has been in our program for 3 years. It has killed 2 handlers and seriously injured 4 others. We keep it because it represents the extreme end of Shadow Maw aggression. It is useful for demonstrating what happens when handling techniques fail. The creature's 6 eyes suddenly focused on the observation window, directly at where Jake stood. For a moment, human and beast locked gazes. Jake felt his mouth go dry. That is the Shadow Maw you will face, Jake Morrison, Draxon continued. In 4 days, you will enter that enclosure. The beast will be restrained by energy bonds that will fade after 60 seconds. In that time, you must establish dominance, achieve submission, or at minimum prove you can survive its initial attack. Medical teams will be standing by, though I doubt they will arrive in time to save you if things go badly. Several recruits had moved away from the window. Even the tough Vrax looked uneasy. The Shadow Maw was a killer, plain and simple, and everyone knew it. Jake forced himself to breathe slowly. Fear was natural. Fear kept you alert, but panic would get you killed. Any questions, human? Draxon asked. Just one, sir. Will I be allowed to bring any equipment into the enclosure? Standard training uniform only. No weapons, no tools, no protective gear. Just you and the beast as nature intended. Understood, sir. That night Jake could not eat. His stomach was twisted in knots. He went back to his quarters and pulled up the video files again, but this time he could not concentrate. The shadow maw he had seen through the window was burned into his memory. Those 6 eyes, that massive body, those terrible teeth. There was a knock on his door. When Jake opened it, he found Kate standing there with Danny and a few other human recruits. "We are having a meeting," Kate said. "Human recruits only. You should come." They gathered in one of the common rooms, about 8 humans total. The others had either quit or were avoiding what was clearly going to be a difficult conversation. "Look," Danny started, "we've been talking, and we think you should request a different assignment. Nobody expects a first-year recruit to face a shadow maw, especially not that shadow maw. It is basically a death sentence. You could ask for something easier, work your way up to the dangerous stuff." "Draxon would never allow it," Jake said. "He assigned me the shadow maw specifically to prove humans cannot handle the hard jobs." "So prove him right," Lisa Martinez said. She looked tired, like she had been crying recently. "Accept the limitation and move on. There is no shame in knowing your limits, Dur. There is shame in not trying," Jake countered. "Look, I know this is dangerous. I know the odds are bad, but if I back down now, every human who comes after me will be judged by my failure. Draxon will use it as evidence that our species is weak. I cannot let that happen." "You cannot let your pride get you killed either," Kate said quietly. "We need you alive, Jake. You are one of the best in our group. If you die trying to prove a point, that does not help anyone." Jake looked around at the worried faces of his fellow humans. They were not trying to discourage him out of cruelty. They were genuinely concerned for his safety. It made him like them more, but it did not change his mind. "I appreciate the concern," he said. "Really, I do. But I have spent the last 2 weeks preparing for this. I have studied that creature, learned its behaviors, practiced techniques that might work. I am not going in blind, and I am not going in on pride alone. I actually think I have a chance." "Based on what?" Danny asked. "Some old research reports that nobody else thinks are valid?" "Based on observation and logic," Jake replied. "Shadow maws are pack animals. They have social structures, communication methods, ways of establishing hierarchy without always resorting to violence. The reports I found documented those behaviors in wild populations. The fact that controlled experiments did not replicate those behaviors just means the experimental conditions were wrong, not that the behaviors do not exist. Or it means wild shadow maws are different from trained ones," Kate pointed out. "Maybe. But Beast Unit 47 was born in the wild. It was captured as a juvenile, which means its early social conditioning came from a natural pack environment. Those instincts should still be there, buried under the aggression training." The room was quiet for a moment. Then Danny sighed. "You are really going to do this, are you?" "Yes. Then we will help," Kate said firmly. "If you are going to risk your life trying to prove humans belong here, the least we can do is support you. What do you need?" Jake felt a wave of gratitude. "I need someone to watch the training videos with me. A fresh perspective might catch something I missed. And I need to practice the vocal patterns with feedback. I have been doing them alone, but I need to know if they sound right to someone else's ears." For the next 3 days, the small group of humans became Jake's support team. They watched videos together, discussing subtle details of shadow maw body language. They listened to Jake practice the vocal patterns, helping him refine the clicks and rumbles until they sounded as close as possible to the wild recordings. They even helped him practice breathing techniques to stay calm under stress. Draxon noticed the increased cooperation among the human recruits but said nothing. He probably thought they were planning a funeral. On the morning of the practical exercise, Jake woke before the alarm. He had barely slept, but his mind was clear. He went through his mental checklist one more time, reviewing everything he knew about shadow maw behavior, pack dynamics, and vocal communication patterns. The training arena was packed when he arrived. Word had spread about the human recruit facing Beast Unit 47, and it seemed like half the station had shown up to watch. Some were probably hoping to see impressive beast handling. Others were likely expecting to witness a tragic accident. Jake tried not to think about which group was larger. Commander Vrel was present, standing on an observation platform next to Draxon. The reptilian commander's yellow eyes watched, Jake with what might have been curiosity. Draxon stepped forward to address the assembled crowd. "Today marks the beginning of practical beast handling exercises for this training cycle," he announced. "We will start with what should be an instructive demonstration of why proper physical conditioning and species-appropriate assignments matter." Jake Morrison, human recruit, will attempt to establish contact with Beast Unit 47, an adult Shadow Maw with a documented history of handler aggression. The crowd murmured. Jake saw some of the alien recruits making gestures that probably meant they were placing bets on how long he would last. The human claims to have discovered techniques in archived research that professional handlers have overlooked, Draxon continued, his tone making it clear what he thought of that claim. Today we will test whether academic study can substitute for proper physical capability. Medical teams are standing by. Energy barriers will prevent the beast from leaving the designated zone. The exercise will continue until the recruit establishes dominance, achieves submission, or is rendered unable to continue. That last phrase hung in the air like a threat. Jake Morrison approached the enclosure entrance. Jake walked forward on legs. Jake woke up to pain. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest as he tried to sit up. The alarm had not gone off yet, but he could not sleep anymore. The digital clock showed it was 3 hours before dawn cycle. He groaned and forced himself out of bed. His body wanted rest, but his mind would not let him. He kept hearing Draxon's mocking voice, kept seeing the dismissive looks from the other alien recruits. The anger that burned in his chest was stronger than the pain in his muscles. He limped to his desk and activated the computer terminal. If he could not sleep, he might as well study. The training database was enormous, filled with information about thousands of different species of war beasts. Jake started reading about the creatures they would eventually be working with. There were flying predators from high-gravity worlds that could snap a person in half with their beaks. There were pack hunters that communicated through electrical pulses. There were solitary ambush predators that could change color to match any background. Each one was deadly. Each one required specific handling techniques. Jake read about training methods used by different species. The Vraks preferred direct physical dominance, using their natural armor to withstand attacks while establishing control. The Kelthari used their forearms to maintain multiple points of contact, making it nearly impossible for a beast to throw them off. The Zephons could create harmonic frequencies that calmed or agitated different species. But what did humans have? No armor, no extra limbs, no special abilities, just their brains and their stubbornness. He dug deeper into the database looking for information that other recruits might have missed. In a section marked as archived research, he found reports from early xenozoologists who had studied various predators in their natural habitats before they were brought into military service. Most of the reports were dry scientific observations, but Jake read them all carefully. One report caught his attention. It was about creatures called Shadow Maws, massive predators from a death world called Korriban Prime. The report mentioned that wild Shadow Maw packs had complex social structures with specific vocalizations used to establish hierarchy. The researcher had documented several of these vocal patterns but noted that attempts to replicate them in captivity had been unsuccessful. Jake found video files attached to the report. He watched footage of wild Shadow Maws interacting, paying close attention to the sounds they made and the body language that accompanied those sounds. He played the videos over and over, trying to memorize the patterns. The alarm finally sounded, and Jake realized he'd been studying for 3 hours straight. He quickly got dressed and headed to the cafeteria. His body still hurt, but the mental activity had helped him focus on something other than pain. Kate was already at the human table, eating slowly and wincing with each movement. "You look like I feel," she said when Jake sat down. "Rough night?" "Could not sleep. Kept dreaming about dropping that stone and having to start over." She poked at her food. "Danny went to medical. Pulled something in his back during the obstacle course. Is he okay?" "They fixed him up, but he was pretty shaken. Lisa is talking about quitting." Jake looked around and saw that the human group was smaller this morning. A few empty seats where recruits had decided they had had enough. "We lost 3 already," Kate said quietly. "Transfer requests. They are moving to other training programs. Easier ones." "Cannot blame them," Jake said. "Draxon is not exactly making this welcoming. He is trying to break us on purpose." Kate's voice had an edge to it. "Did you notice he gives the humans harder variations of every exercise? When the Kelthari did climbing walls, they got walls with handholds. We got smooth walls. When the Vraks ran the obstacle course, they went through at their own pace. We had to do it under time pressure." Jake had noticed. He had thought maybe he was being paranoid, but Kate had seen it too. "So what do we do?" he asked. "We do not quit." Kate's jaw was set in that stubborn way Jake was starting to recognize. We prove him wrong. Training that day was focused on classroom work. The recruits gathered in a large lecture hall where Draxon stood in front of a holographic display that could show three-dimensional images of various beasts. Today you learn about beast psychology, Draxon announced. Understanding how a predator thinks is the first step toward controlling it. Each species has different instincts, different triggers, different weaknesses. He activated the display and a massive creature appeared, rotating slowly in the air. It looked like a cross between a bear and a lizard, with thick scales and powerful claws. This is a Grimjaw from the Outer Rim worlds, Draxon explained. They are solitary hunters with territorial instincts. What is the primary method for establishing dominance with this species? Avrak's recruit raised one of its thick arms. Direct physical confrontation. Challenge and defeat. Correct, Draxon said. Grimjaws respect strength above all else. You must prove you are stronger, or they will never accept your authority. He changed the display to show a sleeker creature with 6 legs and a long tail. This is a razor wing. Pack hunters highly intelligent. What is the primary method here? A Kelthari answered this time. Establish yourself as pack leader through consistent dominance displays and resource control. Also correct, Draxon said. He looked at the human section of the classroom. Let us see if the humans have been paying attention. Jake Morrison, stand up. Jake stood, feeling every eye in the room turn toward him. Draxon changed the holographic display again. This time a massive black creature appeared. It stood on 4 legs, but its body was long and muscular like a big cat. It had 6 eyes arranged in 2 rows, and its mouth was filled with 3 rows of teeth. Long claws extended from each paw. This is a Shadowmaw, Draxon said. One of the most dangerous predators we train. They have killed more handlers than any other species in this program. Tell me, human, how would you establish dominance with a Shadowmaw? Jake stared at the holographic creature, his mind racing. He thought about the research he had read that morning. The videos of wild Shadowmaws, the vocal patterns the researcher had documented. I would use vocal communication first, Jake said carefully. Shadowmaws have complex pack hierarchies in the wild. Before physical dominance, they establish rank through specific vocalizations. The classroom went quiet. Draxon's expression was unreadable. And where did you learn this? The trainer asked, his voice dangerously soft. From archived xenozoology reports in the database. Research from about 30 years ago, before Shadowmaws were regularly used in military applications. Those reports are marked as speculative, Draxon said. The techniques described were never verified in controlled settings. They are considered unreliable. But they were observed in wild populations, Jake argued. In natural conditions, Shadowmaws use vocalizations extensively. It seems logical that those same patterns might work with trained animals. Draxon's forearms crossed and he stepped closer to Jake. You think you know better than established training protocols? You think some dusty old reports contain secrets that generations of professional handlers have missed? I think there might be techniques worth reconsidering, Jake said, keeping his voice respectful but firm. Especially techniques based on natural behavior. Several of the alien recruits were making sounds Jake had learned meant amusement or mockery. Draxon's smile was cold. Very well, human. Since you are so confident in your research, you will have the opportunity to test your theory. The trainer's black eyes glinted with something that might have been malicious satisfaction. In 2 weeks, we begin practical exercises with live beasts. Each recruit will attempt to establish initial contact with an assigned creature. You, Jake Morrison, will be assigned to a Shadowmaw. Kate sucked in a sharp breath. Even some of the alien recruits looked shocked. Shadowmaws were advanced assignments usually given to recruits in their 2nd or 3rd year of training. Is that a problem, human? Draxon asked. No, sir, Jake said, though his heart was pounding. No problem? Excellent. Then sit down and pay attention. You will need every scrap of knowledge you can gather if you want to survive your assignment. Jake sat down, his mind whirling. 2 weeks. He had 2 weeks to prepare for an encounter with one of the deadliest predators in the galaxy. Around him, he could hear whispered conversations in various alien languages. He did not need a translator to know what they were saying. They were already discussing his funeral arrangements. That night, Jake barely left his computer terminal. He read everything he could find about Shadowmaws. He watched every video in the database, studying their movements, their vocalizations, their hunting patterns. He read incident reports about handlers who had been injured or killed working with the creatures, trying to identify what had gone wrong. Kate stopped by his quarters around midnight. "You should sleep," she said from the doorway. "Cannot. Need to study. Jake, you cannot learn everything in 2 weeks. That thing is going to tear you apart. Maybe." He did not look away from his screen. "But I'm going to make it as difficult as possible." Kate sighed. "You know he set you up, right? Drexen is hoping you fail, probably hoping you get hurt badly enough to quit." "I know. So why are you playing his game?" Jake finally turned to look at her. "Because I am tired of being underestimated. My whole life, people have looked at me and decided The enclosure was bigger than it had looked from outside. The rocky terrain stretched out in all directions, with the dim red lighting casting long shadows that moved as Jake walked forward. The air smelled like sulfur and something else. Something musky and wild that made his primitive brain scream at him to run. Beast Unit 47 stood about 30 feet away, held in place by shimmering energy bonds that wrapped around its massive body. The creature's 6 eyes locked onto Jake immediately, and a low growl rumbled from its chest like distant thunder. The sound vibrated through the ground and up through Jake's feet. He could see the countdown timer projected on the wall behind the beast. 55 seconds until the energy bonds faded. 55 seconds to make this work, or become a cautionary tale about human weakness. Jake did not approach directly. That would signal either prey behavior or a direct challenge, and he wanted neither. Instead, he moved to the side, angling his approach so he was not heading straight at the creature. He kept his posture low but not crouched, showing respect for the predator without displaying fear or submission. The Shadowmaw's eyes tracked him. All 6 of them. The creature's head turned to follow his movement, and its growl grew deeper. Muscles bunched under that midnight black fur, preparing to pounce the moment the bonds released. 40 seconds. Jake could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. His mouth was dry. Every instinct he had was screaming at him to get away from the giant killing machine. But he forced himself to move slowly, deliberately, maintaining that angled approach. The growl changed pitch, becoming more aggressive. The Shadowmaw's lips pulled back, revealing all 3 rows of teeth. Saliva dripped from its jaws, hissing slightly when it hit the rocky ground. 30 seconds. This was it. This was the moment where theory met reality. All those hours of study, all those nights practicing vocal patterns, all of it came down to the next 30 seconds. Jake stopped moving forward. He was about 20 feet from the beast now, close enough to see the individual hairs in its fur, close enough to smell the carnivore stench of its breath. He stood still, keeping his body at an angle rather than facing the creature head-on, and then he made the sound. It started as a series of clicks, produced by pressing his tongue against the roof of his mouth and releasing air in sharp bursts. Click, click, pause, click, click, click. The pattern matched what he had heard in the videos of wild Shadowmaw pack leaders. The sound cut through the creature's growling, and for just a moment, the beast's ears twitched forward. 20 seconds. Jake added the second part of the pattern, a low rumble that came from deep in his chest. He had practiced this until his throat was raw, learning to produce a sound that was lower than normal speech, almost a subsonic vibration. The rumble carried a specific rhythm, rising and falling in a way that the research had identified as a dominant signal. The Shadowmaw's growling stopped. Its massive head tilted slightly to one side, and Jake could swear he saw confusion in those 6 alien eyes. The creature's ears were fully forward now, focused entirely on Jake. 15 seconds. He repeated the pattern. Click, click, pause, click, click, click. Then the rumble, low and steady. His voice cracked slightly on the second rumble, and he cursed internally, but he kept the rhythm consistent. The Shadowmaw's body language shifted. The aggressive posture relaxed slightly. The muscles that had been bunched for attack loosened just a fraction. It was still dangerous, still a predator capable of killing him in seconds, but it was no longer in pure attack mode. 10 seconds. Jake repeated the pattern a third time, pouring everything he had into making it perfect. The click sharp and clear, the rumble deep and authoritative. He maintained eye contact with the beast but did not stare aggressively. He was communicating, not challenging. 5 seconds. The energy bonds began to flicker. The Shadowmaw noticed, its body tensing again as freedom approached. Jake's heart rate spiked. This was the moment. Either the communication had worked, or he was about to find out exactly how fast a 1,000-pound predator could move. 3 seconds. Jake made the sound pattern one more time, adding a slight variation at the end that he had observed in the videos when a pack leader was accepting a new member. A gentle rumble, almost questioning. The energy bonds vanished. The observation deck went silent. Jake could imagine hundreds of beings holding their breath, waiting to see if the human would be torn apart. The shadow maw stood free, no longer restrained. It could cross the distance between them in a single leap. Those massive claws could rip through Jake's body like paper. Those jaws could snap his spine with one bite. The creature took a step forward. Jake held his ground, every muscle in his body screaming at him to run. But running would trigger chase instincts. Running would mean death. He stood still and repeated the vocal pattern, keeping his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. The shadow maw took another step. Its nose extended, sniffing the air around Jake. The creature was close enough now that he could feel its breath on his face, hot and rank with the smell of old meat. And then slowly, the massive beast lowered its head. Jake could not believe what he was seeing. The head lowering was a submissive gesture, a sign of acceptance within pack hierarchy. The creature was not submitting completely, not acknowledging Jake as the ultimate pack leader, but it was acknowledging his presence as something other than prey or threat. With his hand shaking only slightly, Jake extended his palm downward, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. He waited, giving the shadow maw time to make a decision. The creature's 6 eyes studied his hand. Seconds ticked by. Then, with a gentleness that seemed impossible for something so large and dangerous, the shadow maw pressed its massive head against Jake's palm. The fur was coarser than Jake expected, thick and wiry. He could feel the heat of the creature's skin beneath, the powerful muscles that could kill him with a twitch, but the shadow maw held still, allowing the contact. Jake moved his hand slowly, stroking along the creature's head, feeling the bone structure underneath. The beast's breathing had calmed. The aggressive posture was gone, replaced by something closer to curiosity. "Good," Jake whispered, keeping his voice low and soothing. "Good boy." He had no idea if the shadow maw was male or female, and he doubted it understood English, but the tone seemed to matter. The creature's ears remained forward, attentive but not aggressive. Jake decided to test the next level. Using the standard command structure taught in the academy, he spoke in Galactic Common, the language most beasts were trained to recognize. "Sit." For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, the shadow maw's hindquarters lowered to the ground. It sat, massive and powerful, but following a command. The observation deck erupted in noise. Jake could hear shocked exclamations in a dozen different languages. Through the transparent barrier, he could see recruits standing up, pointing, talking excitedly to each other. But his focus remained on the creature in front of him. "Stand," he commanded. The shadow maw stood. "Walk with me." Jake took a step backward, and the creature followed, maintaining position at his left shoulder just like the training manuals described for properly bonded beasts. It was working. The vocal patterns had established initial communication. The calm approach had prevented an aggressive response. And the beast's own instincts, those pack behaviors buried under years of isolation and aggression training, had responded to signals it recognized from its wild origins. Jake led the shadow maw in a slow circle around the enclosure. The beast followed perfectly, its massive body moving with surprising grace. When Jake stopped, it stopped. When he turned, it turned. The bond was not complete, not permanent, but it was there, a foundation that could be built upon. Finally, Jake led the creature back to the center of the enclosure, to the spot where the energy bonds had held it. He gave a final command. "Stay." The shadow maw sat again, watching him with those 6 eyes that no longer looked quite so murderous. Jake turned and walked toward the exit door, his back to the predator. It was a calculated risk, a show of trust that could either solidify the preliminary bond or trigger chase instincts. His shoulder blades itched with the imagined feeling of claws about to strike. He reached the door. It opened. He stepped through. Behind him, the shadow maw remained sitting, watching but not attacking. The door sealed, and Jake's legs almost gave out. Adrenaline crash hit him like a wave, and he had to lean against the wall to stay upright. His whole body was shaking now that the immediate danger had passed. The observation deck was chaos. Recruits were talking excitedly, some in amazement, others in clear disbelief. Jake saw credit chips changing hands as bets were settled. The Vraks were making their rumbling sounds of approval. The Keltari were chattering in their musical language. Even the normally reserved Zephons were pulsing with bright colors. Draxon stood motionless on the observation platform, all four arms hanging at his sides. His black eyes were fixed on Jake with an expression that was impossible to read. Commander Vrel descended from the platform and approached Jake. The reptilian officer's yellow eyes studied the human carefully. "That was remarkable, Recruit Morrison," Vrel said. "In 20 years of running this program, I have never seen anyone establish contact with Beast Unit 47, much less achieve command compliance on first interaction. How did you accomplish?" Draxon stared at Jake for what felt like an eternity. The observation deck had grown quieter, everyone watching to see how the head trainer would react to being proven wrong. The Krell's forearms moved slowly, crossing in a way that Jake had learned meant deep contemplation among his species. "You used vocal patterns that are not in the official training curriculum," Draxon said finally, his deep voice carefully neutral. "Yes, sir," Jake replied, keeping his own voice respectful. "I found them in archived research files available in the station database. Research that has been available to every handler and trainer for 30 years, Draxon continued. "Research that I have personally read and dismissed as impractical for controlled training environments." Jake said nothing. There was no good response to that statement. Draxon's expression shifted slightly, and when he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its hard edge. "I dismissed it because I assumed wild behaviors could not be replicated in captivity. I assumed wrong." A ripple of surprise went through the watching recruits. Draxon admitting he was wrong was apparently not something that happened often. "You took a significant risk, Recruit Morrison," the trainer continued. "If your theory had been incorrect, if Beast Unit 47 had not responded to those vocal patterns, you would have been seriously injured or killed." "I know, sir. But I believed the research was sound. The behaviors were well documented. It made sense that a creature born in the wild would retain instinctual responses to pack communication, even after years in captivity." "You believed," Draxon repeated. "Based on what? Academic study? You have never worked with Shadow Maws before today. You have never bonded with any war beast. Yet you were confident enough to stake your life on a theory." "I staked my life on observation, preparation, and logical reasoning, sir. Those are the tools my species has always used to survive." Something changed in Draxon's posture. The aggressive stance relaxed slightly. When he looked at Jake now, there was something different in those black eyes. Not quite respect, not yet, but the contempt was gone. "The rest of you?" Draxon turned to address the assembled recruits, his voice booming across the observation deck. "You have just witnessed something important. Pay attention, because this lesson will keep you alive." He gestured toward Jake with one of his forearms. "This human lacks the physical advantages that most of you possess. He has no armor plating like the Vrax, no multiple limbs like the Kelthari, no natural weapons or enhanced senses. By every conventional measure, he should have been the least qualified recruit in this program." Jake noticed several of the alien recruits shifting uncomfortably. Some of them had been the ones laughing at him during training exercises. But what he lacks in physical capability, he compensates for with intelligence and determination, Draxon continued. While others relied on their natural advantages, he studied. While others assumed the established methods were the only methods, he researched alternatives. While others would have backed down from a dangerous assignment, he prepared himself as thoroughly as possible. The trainer walked slowly around the observation deck, making eye contact with different recruits as he spoke. "Some of you are stronger than others. Some are faster. Some have abilities that seem to guarantee success in this program. But I have trained thousands of handlers over my career, and I can tell you this. Natural advantages mean nothing if you do not have the discipline to use them properly. And limitations mean nothing if you have the intelligence to work around them." He stopped in front of the group of human recruits, where Kate and Danny and the others were standing with expressions of shock and pride. "I underestimated the humans," Draxon said bluntly. "I judged them by physical standards alone and assumed they would fail. I was wrong. Morrison has shown me that there are different kinds of strength and different paths to success." The Krell trainer turned back to Jake. "You will continue working with Beast Unit 47. The preliminary bond you established today is just the beginning. You will need to reinforce it, deepen it, and prove that it can hold under stress. But I will no longer assign you tasks designed to make you fail. From now on, I will train you the same way I train every recruit who shows genuine potential." Jake felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he had not realized he was carrying. "Thank you, sir." "Do not thank me yet," Draxon replied, but there was almost a hint of humor in his voice. "My actual training is much harder than my attempts to break you. You will wish I was still mocking you instead of pushing you to your limits." Over the next weeks, Jake discovered that Draxon had not been joking. The training intensified dramatically, but now it was focused on making Jake better rather than proving him inadequate. The trainer pushed him hard, but also taught him techniques for working with shadow maws that had been developed over decades of practical experience. Jake spent hours every day with Beast Unit 47, who he had started calling Shadow in private. The bond between them grew stronger. Shadow learned to respond to more complex commands. Jake learned to read the subtle shifts in the creature's body language that indicated mood changes. Together, they practiced formations, hunting simulations, and combat scenarios. The other recruits noticed the change in how they were all being treated. Draxon still maintained his harsh training style, still pushed everyone to their limits, but the cruel mockery was gone. He criticized failures, but he also acknowledged successes. He gave extra work to those who struggled, but it was designed to help them improve rather than to humiliate them. Kate successfully bonded with a flying predator called a stormwing, a vicious bird-like creature with razor-sharp talons and a wingspan of 12 feet. Danny overcame his initial hesitation and established a solid partnership with a pack of smaller hunters called Razorbacks. Even Lisa, who had been ready to quit, found her confidence working with a serpentine creature that responded well to her patient approach. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after Jake's first encounter with Shadow, Commander Vrel visited the training arena. He watched as Jake put Shadow through an advanced obstacle course that involved navigating through tight spaces, climbing over barriers, and responding to commands even when distracted by simulated prey. Shadow performed flawlessly, his massive body moving with precision through obstacles that seemed too small for him. When Jake gave the final command to return to rest position, the Shadow Maw trotted back to his side and sat calmly, those 6 eyes focused on Jake with what might have been affection. "Impressive," Vrel said, approaching Jake after the demonstration. "You have exceeded all expectations, Recruit Morrison. Your success has prompted some interesting discussions among the command staff." "Sir?" Jake asked, not sure where this was going. "We are considering revising some of our training protocols," Vrel explained. "Your use of those archived vocal patterns has proven effective not just with shadow maws, but with several other species as well. Other handlers have started experimenting with similar approaches, using natural communication methods documented in old research. The results have been promising." Jake felt a surge of pride. His research had done more than just help him survive. It was actually changing how the program approached beast training. "Additionally," Vrel continued, "we are re-evaluating how we assess recruit potential. Physical capability will always be important, but perhaps we have been too focused on natural advantages and not focused enough on adaptability and intelligence. Your species has demonstrated that determination and creativity can compensate for physical limitations. Does this mean humans will be more accepted in the program, sir?" "It means humans will be judged fairly, the same as any other species. No more, no less." Vrel's yellow eyes studied Jake carefully. "That is what you wanted, is it not? Equal treatment?" "Yes, sir. That is exactly what I wanted." Over the following months, Jake continued to excel in the program. Shadow became one of the most reliable beasts in the training facility, his aggressive reputation replaced by a reputation for responsiveness and control. Jake helped other recruits who struggled with their assigned beasts, sharing the techniques he had learned and encouraging them to look beyond established methods. Draxon, true to his word, pushed Jake harder than ever, but the relationship between trainer and student had changed fundamentally. There was mutual respect now, an understanding that they were both working toward the same goal of creating the best handlers possible. Graduation day arrived on a clear morning, simulated by the station's lighting systems to look like dawn, breaking over a peaceful planet. Jake stood with the other successful recruits, wearing the formal uniform of a certified beast handler. Out of the original group of 70 recruits from various species, 43 had completed the program. 10 humans had started and 8 had finished, a success rate that surprised many of the instructors. Commander Vrel presented each graduate with their handler certification, a small crystal badge that would identify them as qualified to work with war beasts throughout the Galactic Defense Initiative. When he reached Jake, Frel paused and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. Jake Morrison, human, graduated top of class in theoretical knowledge, second in practical application, and first in innovative problem solving. You are hereby certified as a Class 1 beast handler with specialization.